Following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to FBC Radio Live. We are finally back on the air. It's only Thursday, right? Yeah, Thursday, June the 3rd. We're rocking and rolling in the sixth month of the year 2021. And, it's going to be a pretty short week, obviously, Thursday, Friday. And then, we're going to fill you in on some of the plans for next week and, a couple days after. Because guess what? I'm going on vacation. That's right. Vacation, my friend. And I have not been on vacation in quite some time. I'm heading up, as most of you know, or at least the people listening to the show know, I'm heading back up to Massachusetts for a good week and a half, and going to see some people and enjoy the Northeast for the first time in 6 years. So, but we'll get into that. So we'll apprise you of what our schedule is going to be like next week and the weeks after. But before we do that, I got to bring in my co-host because, well, I can't really do this alone. Mike, what's up, buddy?
La, la, la. I'm doing well, buddy. I am doing well. It's great to be back on the microphone here on FBC Radio Live. Thank you so much to our loyal listening fan base for hanging in there with us during a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back. We're ready to go. And as usual, there is never a shortage of things to talk about, but is there? It is just action-packed lore when it comes to the world of professional sports. Every major sport now has a major story.
Well, of course, we can talk about the trade that sent Julio Jones to New England Patriots that obviously happened because, spiked people said it was going to happen yesterday, and obviously it happened, right, Mike? I didn't check, but I'm assuming because of their, long list of accurate predictions, I'm assuming it just happened yesterday, correct? Did I assume correctly, Mike?
You assumed correctly that it didn't. Well, let me bite my tongue for a second. Actually, I don't think, with respect, I don't think it was Spike that reported that it was going to happen yesterday. I think that might have been. I think that might have been a Chanel bomb, but in any case, wherever
I can't keep up with all the fake reports,
folks. Yeah, it's tough, but I mean, I want to be fair to all parties involved. I don't think it was Spike that reported that it was going to be yesterday, but yeah, it's interesting. You always hear about the Twitter keyboard warriors doing their thing, and the sources with a Z, and the weapons with a Z. Yeah, I mean, a lot of much ado about nothing so far. I still think the trade will very much happen. Still anyone's guess as to where he ends up. I continue to be less optimistic by the day that it's going to be New England.
Yeah, well, I mean, we joke, and that's kind of what we do here. We make jokes. We crack jokes. But, we all knew that this wasn't going to a solution to this issue was not going to happen before now. So the real, I guess, watch is on now. And if he goes to New England, he goes to New England. If he goes to Baltimore, he goes to Baltimore. I do think, like you, that he will get traded. Whether or not that's New England, I couldn't tell you. I mean, obviously, I'd like to see him. I love seeing great players on the team that I root for personally. But it all comes at a price. And what is that price? How is it going to affect the team moving forward? Excuse me, we'll find that out with whatever team that he ends up getting traded to. But at least now, it could happen any minute. I'm not saying that it will. I'm not saying that it can't happen 2 weeks from now or a month from now. And that could very well be the case. But it now behooves the Falcons to trade him now that we're past that June 1st deadline. So, hey, keep your eye out for it and see what happens because you never know. You could be enjoying a nice afternoon out, having a lunch, and you look at your phone, all of a sudden, breaking news. Julio Jones traded to X. But, we'll obviously get into that a little bit more. We have John Sapichetti coming up here because we're obviously going to talk pretty heavily with what's going on in the NBA, specifically with the Celtics because, obviously their season is over, but they're very much in the news right now for a lot of other things. And but before we do that, obviously we didn't get on earlier this week, so we didn't have an opportunity to kind of give you an update on what's going to happen next week. So I personally, like I said, am going to be driving up to Massachusetts. So the ability to do a live show could be compromised a little bit, Mike. And I don't want to lessen the quality of the program. So we decided that given the time, it's probably going to be a good time to take a nice week off. I believe one of our counterparts, coworkers, Dylan, is also going on vacation next week, so it kind of works out pretty well. We're all in sync in that sense. But what we will try to do, and I haven't quite figured out this out yet, and this goes for the week after as well. You know, the first few days, because my vacation's a little open ended, so to speak. You know, I have some flexibility as to when I actually leave. So the following week, I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to have 5 live shows, but I'm not saying we won't. We'll kind of figure that out. But the idea is also to maybe release a pre-recorded podcast or two. So we won't be on the air live next week. Sorry, folks. You're going to have to watch old episodes if you're really, really dying to see us. But I think we might be able to sneak in a couple maybe pre-recorded shows, and we'll release obviously as a podcast as we do every episode of the show. So keep an eye out for that, and obviously follow at Full Press or at FPC Radio or at FPC Radio Live for any specific programming notes or episodes that we dish out, because it's it'll be fun. And like I said, maybe I'll chime in during my trip up, because I'm going to take in the scenery a little bit, Mike. I'm going to take in the scenery a little bit before I land somewhere and stay for the night before I make the final trip up.
Absolutely. And, always make that trip very safely, very securely. That's one of the reasons why we're going to, be off the air. Ian hanging out of, the window of his car trying to do a show and trying to get everything all set. And,
some people might.
Yeah, exactly. But we're looking forward to seeing you up here in the Northeast, bud. The weather is following you up. The weather forecast up here for the next couple of weeks right now extended. I mean, who knows? The extended 10 shows that the weather's going to be nice, and we'll come up here to the cold weather we had here over the weekend for the for Memorial Day.
I got my Gore-Tex jacket.
When you have heat on Memorial Day weekend, you're in New England. It's crazy and it's really ridiculous, but it was the reality up here, and unfortunately we had to do it. And that cold streak extended from the weekend right up until this week with all of the news surrounding the Celtics. And I don't want to step on any toes. I know we're going to talk to John a lot about that, but the Bruins in the midst. Obviously, the Patriots continue OTA up here. The Sox are continuing to do their thing. So going to be a good time for you to be back up here in New England for the time being.
Yeah, and that's the good thing. It's like, I'm eager at some point to visit during winter time, but not this time. I don't want to drive up during winter necessarily. I chose this opportunity to drive up because, it's going to be nice out, and I haven't done the drive in a while. I have my car that I bought in September that I've maybe driven 3,500 miles on, which, again, anyone who's known me or is, outside of this realm, basically people that I've known for years know that, I used to drive like 3,500 miles every 2 weeks easily because of the job.
That's like a half month for you.
Yeah. And now it's been, I bought the car in the middle of September, so we're pushing a year. So I'm probably going to double the miles that I've driven so far in the car that I have. But I'm excited to do it because, again, for those who know me, know my obsession with the car that I own now, and it's a nostalgic value that brings me back to some younger days of mine, some high school into college days. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for that, and of course to be able to see mountains. I'll be honest. I'm excited to see mountains. I'm excited to see just the different scenery, and of course, be able to get up there and see some people that I haven't seen in quite some time, or haven't actually ever seen outside of the realm of this. So, and I'm just talking about you, Mike. I'm talking about you. So if you hear headlines that 2 people got arrested in Rhode Island, just assume it's probably the 2 of us doing something stupid because,
I'm sure.
I plan on getting him a record by the time by the time I leave the Northeast next week. I joke.
Just remember, if we ever get into problems, I know people.
Yeah,
But in any
right.
case,
That's right.
no, it'll be great. It'll be great to have you up here. And I think the big question right now on my mind, on everybody's mind who's a big fan of the show, is: are we going to have any Ian footage driving up? I'm imagining something very similar to when Kramer drove out to the West Coast. I'm imagining vignettes, yeah, exactly.
You think these hands have been soaking in ivory liquid?
Your hands soaking in ivory liquid, your head banging, and corn, puffs, coming out of your mouth. I mean, just great stuff. I think we need some Ian footage.
I might have to get a corn cob pipe for the for the occasion. Going old school though. Old school, maybe maps, maybe some fresh cigarettes. No, why make it more difficult? I'm going to use my phone. It's going to tell me where to go. I've done the drive several times, so I know where I'm going. But it'll be fun. But you know what? That's a good idea, Mike. That's a good idea. Maybe I should use this as an opportunity to create some content for our program here, and maybe we can
take what do they call them now? I guess they call these things Velfies or whatever. Take a Velfie on the side of the road, a self video, where am I, type thing.
Oh man. Well, you know what? Maybe I'll have to plan this out. I'll figure out something. I gotta keep the fans entertained at least for a little bit.
Well, you pull a Belushi, see if you can guess where I am now.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'm gonna. I'll have. It'll be good. It'll be good. I am still thinking about entertainment selection though. I have the ability, Mike, to play movies or television, whatever, videos. Let's put it that way, while driving in my car. It's a nice little additive. It's a nice little change of pace from the music. Of course, I'll be listening to music as well, depending on the time. But I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do here, because I could go the route of, well, hey, I'm going to watch an entire season of 24 on my way up. I could do that, but that's committing to the same thing not that it's a bad thing. I could easily do 24 over and over and over and over again for several hours, but I'm also thinking, well, maybe I should mix it up with several movies. Maybe I should do like a movie franchise, or maybe, bounce around. What do you think, Mike? I need your opinion on this. Well, how should I approach this trip? Assuming that, again, there's going to be a portion of the drive that I will be listening to music and, things like Howard Stern and sports talk and all that good stuff. And some of the great podcasts here at Full Press Coverage. I got to throw that out there. But for the movie arc, for the entertainment arc, how should I approach this, Mike? Should I go straight 24? Should I go for a specific movie franchise, or say the MCU franchise, where I'm watching several different movies of somewhat of the same but different? How do you approach this?
I don't think you can go wrong either way. If you do a season of 24, if you do the whole Marvel, if you wanted to get into something like that, I can definitely understand the argument for all of them. I would do something you're very familiar with, so that way your attention is not diverted. Keep in mind, you are operating heavy machinery, my friend. You do not want to be looking at something that you haven't seen before.
That's true.
That you need to spot, and then all of a sudden, wham, there's a tree. And I don't say that lightly. Be very, very careful. So something that you can play in your head, that'll be able to get you done. So I think that's a good move.
That is very sage advice. And in all seriousness, I do follow that principle, because again, you tell people you put on a movie while you're driving. I went out of my way to circumvent the emergency brake connection for the video in order to be able to do this, because in most of these, you can't play videos while the car's driving. The emergency brake has to be engaged in some form or fashion. But I do. I would never ever watch something that I've already never seen before, because again, I don't want to add any distraction. For the most part, I'm not sitting there watching. You know what I mean? It's more of a
No, I
I'm
say that. I
listening
say
and
that tongue in cheek, folks, because I've
yeah,
known
yeah.
obviously Ian for quite a while. Safety always comes first, and I want to assure you that that always is the case. But
Of
yeah, I mean,
course.
I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those watches or views. I mean, they keep you intrigued, they keep you awake on your toes. So me, I'm always partial to 24, but I don't think you can
Yeah.
go wrong with the Marvel universe.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking too. I'm like, you know what? How and I'm open to suggestions. So anyone listening out there wants to chime in, please. If you have like even it doesn't have to be what I've already mentioned, but just movies in general. But I'm open to suggestions. I'm just thinking of it like, okay, well, it's going to be a fun trip, but for the most part, the first leg of that, once I get out, well, even really when I'm in Florida, is nothing. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, nothing. Billboards and south of the border, advertisements on the highway and trees. That's it. That's it. I mean, it's a tough leg of the journey. Let me tell you that much. Once you get up, into Virginia and you kind of get more of the scenery and the mountains, and you get into the various cities, all that stuff. It's a little bit different, but that first stretch, that first day, that Tuesday, that's gonna be a long day. I plan on logging about 12 hours that day, 12 to 14 hours, the bulk of the journey. Let's just put it that way. And the entertainment's going to be crucial because again, there's not going to be much in the form of scenery
Right.
around me. Um, so yeah. If you're curious, if you want, chime in with some suggestions. I would love to. I would love to hear it, and maybe someone's going to turn me on to something that I wasn't even thinking about. I did, however, over the last several days, and our friend Chris Blackie will appreciate this because I know he's a big fan. I finally watched Ozark on Netflix, and I've recently started Mayor of Easttown. I've heard some really good. A lot of people have been commenting the last couple of days
Yeah.
about it, and I figured I'd jump in, and I've watched the first two. I think the first two episodes. I'm liking it so far, so I will apprise people of how that goes. But I am trying to get in touch with John Sapichetti. I think he's building his case to be the next Celtics head coach. So I'm hoping I'm not catching him in the middle of some pretty important planning stage. John, how are you doing?
Good morning.
Friend? Can everyone
I'm doing
hear?
okay.
Can everyone hear everyone? Mike, can you hear John? Please tell me you can hear John.
I can hear John. Can John hear me?
I can.
Oh man, what a day we are! Yes, thank
Game's
you,
all here.
thank you. We are here. I have anxiety every single time we start to connect here because I'm like, am I about to do something that's just going to be pointless and is going to lead to the end of the show? Because sometimes we just can't connect, and I have to translate for Mike, and Mike always tells me, well, the things I say aren't the things that you tell John I say, and I'm like, well, Mike, I'm just translating what I hear, and when you continue to compliment me, that's all I'm going to hear. But no, we're glad that you're connected, John. We were telling the folks out there we only got 2 shows this week, and then we're off all of next week because of my adventures up north that I will be partaking in, and maybe by then, John, the Celtics will have a new head coach. What do you think?
I would hope so. I think they should move quickly on this. The only thing is 2 of the leading candidates are still in the playoffs. Chauncey Billups, who's an assistant coach with the LA Clippers, would be my first choice. Great winner as a player. Was rumored to be the general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers a few years ago, and somehow it didn't come to fruition. I'm a big fan of Chauncey Billups. I think he would make an outstanding coach. Now, the Clippers are down 3-2 to Dallas, so if Dallas pisses them off in 6, then you go ahead and approach Chauncey Billups to see if you can get him as your next coach, or Sam Cassell, who's an assistant coach right now with the 76ers, who are a little bit more advanced in the playoffs. They've already advanced to the next round. So those are the 2 guys that I would be interested in. I think you need a former player with championship pedigree. Cassell won 3 championships, 2 in Houston, 1 with the Celtics. We know what Billups did with Detroit back in 2004. And both are guys that I think would command the room and would command respect from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Those are my first 2 choices. And, maybe they can make that move sooner rather than later. I do think Philadelphia is going to go a little farther in the playoffs, again, depending on Joel Embiid. But Chauncey Billups is my first choice, and if the Clippers get knocked out in Game 6, Wick Grousbeck and Brad Stevens have to do their due diligence and reach out to Chauncey Billups, because I think he's going to be an outstanding NBA coach.
Yeah, I don't want to go like the Stan Van Gundy route, the Mark Jackson. I don't want that. I'm done with the retreads. I don't like.
You're talking Stan Van Gundy, who's already in New Orleans, who somehow didn't get that team to perform. And Stan Van Gundy, by the way, who is in worse shape than I am. I mean, I think he's a little shorter than me and about 40 pounds heavier. I mean, I look like Russell Westbrook next to him, so I don't think you need Stan Van Gundy on the sideline. I'm still not sure why New Orleans hired him. Jeff Van Gundy always gets rumored, and Jeff, I think, is a better coach than Stan. But these guys like Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson are making a ton of money doing broadcasting. So why do they want to go through the agony of coaching? Although they're competitors, so they'd be interested in that. But Chauncey Billups, I think, is the perfect choice. And let's root against the Clippers for more than one reason. But that would be one reason to root against the Clippers, is to get Chauncey Billups here as the next head coach as soon as possible.
So what you're saying is you're taking your hat out of the mix. So John Sapichetti, head coach of the Boston Celtics, is not going to happen?
No, I'm more interested in coaching the Lakers. I will serve as LeBron's assistant coach. And maybe Rob Pelinka can hire me as assistant general manager, because I couldn't do a worse job. The LeBron wants changes. There will be changes. I couldn't have done a worse job than Rob Pelinka putting this roster together. Because none of these guys can shoot on that roster, including LeBron. He struggled shooting in this series against Phoenix. But that's where I'd want to go. I'd love to move to LA. Why not? The climate's a lot better.
The sun and the sand out in LA, big Hollywood. Mr. Hollywood, John Sapichetti. That's right. See,
like when Kramer went out there. Remember when Kramer went out to LA?
That is the second time that specific Seinfeld
talking about that, John,
has been referenced today.
Yeah, we were just talking about that because Ian and
if you weren't listening, that's
to the Northeast. I said we want some vignettes of similar to what Kramer did when he drove out to the West Coast. Is just back and forth, picking up hitchhikers, things of that nature.
One more time. You think these hands have been soaking in ivory liquid?
And then he's put away because he's accused of murdering someone. Yeah. And then they found the murderer, and of course George and Jerry are dancing on the courtroom steps, there's another murder that took place while Kramer was in jail. So that
the murderer strikes again.
Yeah.
And it's always funny because that's what's his name, Ron Howard's brother too. The guy who's the actual murderer, I believe, right? That's who plays.
Right. Yeah.
He's a notoriously good tipper. Don't forget that.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but obviously, when it comes to the Celtics, this is something that I know people were shocked, or maybe shocked's not the word, but were surprised that Danny Ainge stepped down. But to me, I mean, I'm not. It's not that surprising. I mean, he's been in the role for 18 years. He's recently had a heart attack, and he's an older guy. He's this is a good time for him to step away. And I do think, much like there is in a lot of the Boston fan base, whether it comes to basketball or hockey, is specifically there's just a split on a few topics where people are so far on one direction and so far on the other that there's just no reconciling. Tuukka Rask, that's one of them.
Right.
Right now, Brad Stevens is becoming another, because there's people that will defend him to the death. And then there's also those who think that he's a terrible coach and needs to go. And I don't think either of those are accurate. I think I think what's very encouraging in all of this is Brad's self-awareness and self-reflection, because I think he understands. Like he's a really good coach, but he struggles consistently in certain things. Sometimes it's building a rotation. Sometimes it's reaching some of these players, and how many times we're going to hear, Brad Stevens saving those timeouts for whatever, so there's certain aspects of the game that he just obviously understands. certain dynamics of certain players. And again, he wasn't necessarily the team builder with Danny Ainge there. So, maybe he views this as an opportunity, and maybe he's better suited for finding the right players, but understanding also that they need a different dynamic voice leading that locker room. And to me, that's impressive for someone to recognize that, especially at a really young age, and certainly one where people could look at that, and it's not an easy decision to make. I mean, people could look at that as like, wow, you're a head coach of the Boston Celtics, and you're going to give that up. Well, maybe it's the right move, and maybe it's the one that finally moves the Celtics in the right direction. And look, maybe Brad Stevens isn't going to, again, be completely tied to guys like, say, Marcus Smart or someone else that maybe Danny Ainge is. So, it's interesting. The Celtics needed to do something. I think we all agree. They're not at the point of blowing the entire team up because, again, I mean, you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and they haven't even reached their primes yet. I mean, Jason Tatum is a superstar right now. What is he going to be like in 2 years, John? So there's a lot of good pieces with this team. They needed a bit of a wake-up call, more so than just adding a couple different players to the roster.
I just think the whole thing seems strange, though. If you watched that press conference yesterday, Danny Ainge didn't look relieved or happy. He looked kind of upset, pissed, whatever the case may be. I think this was kind of a mutual decision that maybe he was weighing moving on, and I don't think Wyc Grousbeck really pushed back. I think he said, okay, Danny, go ahead and retire. I think the roster construction of the Celtics the last couple of years has been rather poor. Go back to the summer of 2018 after the Celtics lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers in 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals without Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving. I mean, they had a roster of Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. They also had Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Marcus Morris, and Aaron Baines. That may have been the deepest roster and most talented roster in the NBA. Not quite the roster the Golden State Warriors had, but they were more top-heavy, obviously.
But remember,
Durant,
they competed.
Steph Curry and Klay Thompson.
They competed with those Warriors teams during that season.
They always would match up with them. Yeah, they beat them one time and then played another close game. But then they got to the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, and after winning game 1, they just got absolutely obliterated by the Milwaukee Bucks, and Kyrie moved on, and we know the rest is history. And all you have left now is Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, who I think they should move on from at this point. And that's it. Everybody else is gone. I mean, you turned some assets into absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You turned Kyrie Irving into Kemba Walker. You turned Al Horford into Tristan Thompson at some point. Like, so there's a roster purge that is left them with less than they had before. And it, in that league, it's about talent. You can have the greatest coach in the history of the sport, all of that stuff. It's about talent. And right now they're, probably the 5th or 6th most talented team in the Eastern Conference. There's 3 that are miles ahead of them. And I think Atlanta has a better roster at this point, as we saw in the playoffs.
Well, I think personally, I think they're in an impossible situation with Kyrie. So I can't necessarily fault them entirely for that. And as we've seen it play out, I mean, Kyrie's out of his mind. I'm sorry. I mean, I know there's people out there that think he's some like deep thinking sage. I think he's an idiot. Look, I mean, You may think that, but there's players in the league, and a lot of them don't think that, and that's the problem. If you're trying to get players from within the league, that's their opinion is more important than our opinion. Oh,
obviously.
of course.
So I think he's the Pied Piper of the Brooklyn Nets. He's the one who got Kevin Durant there, and I'm sure he was pleased to bring James Harden. So
they're all kind of similar personalities too. I mean, Kevin Durant's not that much different. I just look.
He's not a leader, obviously.
No,
right?
no,
I mean, they don't really have a leader, and that could blow up at any moment. That's why I'm still hesitant to pick them to win this championship. I think Milwaukee can beat them.
Oh yeah,
in this next playoff series.
Easily.
But I mean, if those 3 guys are harmonious and play like they did in most of the Celtics series, good luck. I mean, those guys score 85 points a game without taking a lot of shots. I mean, the last 2 games against the Celtics guys, they shot 55% from 3.
Well, let's
22 of 40. That's
fair.
Insane.
Let's be fair too. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to push back a whole hell of a lot more than the Boston Celtics because the Boston Celtics were Jason Tatum and a collection of people, bodies. Yeah, I mean, that's all it was. So like, this idea that Kyrie's talking about, oh, this is a championship run that's going to unite the world. No. See, I told you, he's absolutely delusional. The whole shtick, this whole, no, I don't want to call it shtick, this whole nonsense that happened over the last week and a half, completely created and only pushed by Kyrie himself, just completely turned me off to a lot of I just don't have time for his nonsense anymore. So like from a Celtics standpoint, like his situation, it's impossible. Does he want to be here? Does he not want to be here? I mean, I don't, I can't tell you exactly, what led ultimately to their decision to be like, all right, we're good with it. We're done. And then again, signing Kemba Walker, maybe, the choices, it's hard to find someone to replace, or it's impossible to find someone to replace the talent level of Kyrie. But, in hindsight, was there a better option than Kemba out there? Well, maybe they consider bringing Terry Rozier back. But again, at that point, the relationship between the team and that player was kind of really fractured. And I didn't see how that was going to happen. So there's a lot of just situations that just transpired that took you from, like you said, John, one of the most talented rosters in the league to now it's not a terrible situation. You said, well, all they have is Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Well, that's a pretty damn good situation, but not.
That is a good start, yeah.
Not when you're a team that, expected to win championships 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at this whole thing, and this is why Ainge is paying for this with his job. And again, they're painting it as a retirement or stepping down or whatever the case may be. He did look pleased yesterday, and he didn't really that relieved. I think his comments last week while he was on local radio didn't really help him when he was at the golf course during his weekly hit and seemed dismissive of any racial problems in Boston. He goes, I never seen it. Well, you're a 62-year-old white guy. Your job as president of basketball operations is to know what's going on. And look, 7 months ago, Marcus Smart posted on the Players Tribune a really thoughtful, long piece about racial issues in Boston that he faced. And then he accompanied it with a video.
Real quick. I'm not disagreeing, but I think, again, this kind of goes back to Kyrie kind of creating a lot of this situation. I don't think anyone's going to sit here and deny that, racial issues don't exist in Boston. I mean, they exist in every city in the country, and that's kind of the point. It's how this whole situation has been framed. Like, Kyrie going up and preemptively accusing the city of racism was horribly. I thought that was just, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, last week. It really undermines the entire actual situation going on to preemptively do that. And the reason he did it was to skirt criticism. And we saw it exactly play out the way I anticipated it when we first talked about it. It was, well, anything and everything is always going to be about racism now. And we saw it. And it's like, well, some knucklehead throws an empty water bottle, and all of a sudden it's the crime of the century. And it's a racist move. Well, there's nothing to suggest it was racist other than just the difference in color of the two people. And that's not necessarily a great reason because there's no other situation. The guy was just a drunk idiot. I mean, you get those
21-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's not an excuse. And look, he deserves to get punished. I'm not saying that. My bigger point with this isn't, I mean, again, I think Kyrie Irving in his 2 years here and 2 years since has done more damage to this franchise than anything that's happened since the deaths of Lenny Bias and Reggie Lewis. And I know that sounds hyperbolic and bombastic. No, you know what? That's the first I've heard that. I agree. I mean,
when he got here, remember his original press conference? It was with Gordon Hayward. You're like, holy crap, the Celtics are loaded. They're going to win the East this year, right? And then Gordon Hayward gets hurt. That's not Kyrie Irving's fault. Although he did throw the lob pass, but I think Jay Crowder made kind of a dirty move on that. That's a whole other story. But my bigger point is with Danny Ainge is Marcus Smart posted that back in October before Kyrie Irving said anything. Danny Ainge, in an organization, you have to know what your players are thinking. Now, I'm not saying Danny Ainge should be reading the Players Tribune or following Marcus Smart on Instagram, but someone in an organization has to be aware of those things. Someone in the media relations department or communications, or get an intern who's really good at social media. I'm not saying you sneak up on the players, But when I worked at the Boston Herald, I had to sign a form that they would monitor my social media, and there was one tweet that I put out. Actually, was during Deflategate, and I had to take it down because it was sourced by only one person, and it turned out to be true. But they asked me to take it down. I have a very good friend who tweeted out something covering a court case who got suspended for 3 days because of that tweet, which turned out to be true. So in any work environment, you have some sort of policies. I'm not saying sneak up on players and monitor everything they do, but if Marcus Smart posts something on the Players Tribune and has a Instagram video, someone in the organization should have made Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens aware of this. And it just seemed like when Danny Ainge, I think it really was a nail in the coffin last week when he just seemed dismissive. He's on a golf course, and look, go golf all you want. But you know what? You're doing it. Absolutely. Go right ahead. Well, all you executives like to golf. See, Mike and I, we don't have time to golf, right, Mike? Because we're just the worker bees here.
Well,
the CEO of the company can go out and golf.
Well, the Bruins are playing tonight, so I have to play in order for them to win. I mean, I don't know how else I can do it. It's pressure. I don't have a choice, really.
No, are you superstitious like I am?
Oh, I'm a goalie. Of course I am.
Of course. Okay, so you have to golf the day they play because they'll win.
They're 3-0.
Oh man,
they're 3-0.
That is awesome because I love it.
And I didn't play. And I didn't
exact way.
I didn't play game 2 the other night, and they lost in overtime. First time they lost in 5 games. So I was like, what? I'm going to have to suck it up and go play golf in the beautiful weather today. But
I'm the same way. Ian in the 2016 finals. The Cavaliers were down 3-1. I was living in Somerville at the time, and there's a place in Davis Square called Mike's Restaurant, which is really good. So I got a meatball parm for dinner. They won game 5. I had to have a meatball parm sub before game 6 and before game 7, and they won the title. I had it in my mind that I had something to do with it. Obviously, I did, but
no, you did.
We fit along well then, Ian.
Yes.
We're both clinically insane.
I growing up being a goalie, it was a lot of superstition. I'd do the same little post pad tap every single day. I would drink the same thing. I would eat the same thing. I would watch. At the time, remember the in my lifetime, during my time playing hockey when I was a kid, the Bruins were not good. But my favorite, I loved them and unconditionally. But my favorite goalie, my favorite player was Martin Brodeur. Goalie, and I tried to emulate it. So I would watch his highlights from his Stanley Cup runs. At the time, it was 95 and 2000. That was as far as we got. That's how long ago it was. And I would watch it before every single game. Same thing, same meal, same 2 Gatorades every single time. So very superstitious. And to get back to your main point, though, before we get too off track, because I do agree that there is some disconnect there, but I don't want to I think there is a natural disconnect that you can dismiss the conversation that's been happening the last week and a half, which has basically been framed around, Boston being the most racist city in America, which is essentially the topic at hand, to a more appropriate conversation, which is just the general issues facing not only Boston, but every city in America. I mean, when you sit there and shift and put all the weight of this through the realm of sports, and this is something that really bugged me, and this is what we talked about the other day, is a lot of this is motivated by people's hatred of their sports teams. And that's to me is just, it really hurts the overwhelming or the overarching goal here, which is to create more racial harmony as opposed to more racial divide. But now people are creating these narratives around their hatred of sports teams, and I'm just trying to bring it all together. So if say Danny Ainge was thinking of that question through that perspective, through those lens of what had been going on with Kyrie's comments, and even after he got the water bottle thrown at him, he again throws in the whole racial aspect of it with no actual supporting evidence of that. It's not like the guy went up like what's his face what's he yell? Death to tyrants. After he shoots Abraham Lincoln. It's not like the guy went up there and screamed some racial epitaph and then threw the water bottle at him. Of course, if that's the case, then mention it. But the point is, I think people are very easily creating racial divide where there isn't, and there's enough already. And right now, that's my problem. So if Danny Ainge is thinking of it in that context, then I understand why maybe he was a little bit dismissive. But I don't think he's naive enough to think that there aren't issues. We see them every day in every city, sports or not. They exist, and it's not just a Boston problem. It's not a Celtics KKK fan problem. It's a national problem, and until people accept that and stop using sports as a conduit to add this conversation into the mix, then we're just going to go around in the same stupid circle over and over again, and nothing's going to happen.
That's macro. I want to look at it more in micro, and what Ainge did last week on his weekly radio hit, and then we heard from a conference 2 years ago where he was asked about, players being involved with social issues. And he says, I don't really listen to them. They're like the liberals in Hollywood. Like, at that point, how can Danny Ainge recruit free agents?
That's fair. I mean, I didn't remember.
It becomes impossible.
That, so.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we heard Anthony Davis's father say, my son doesn't want to play in Boston. Obviously, I tell you, Kyrie's done a lot of damage to this franchise. It's just like he stepped on Lucky, which I'm not offended that he stepped on a logo. Who cares? But he really, that was symbolic of what he did to this franchise while he was here in the 2 years.
Well, here's the thing, because we're running out of time. I do want to comment on that real quick. I'm with you. I'm not like, I'm not deeply offended like some people are. But the entire act was childish and disrespectful. People say and then I hated the days after where people were like, "Oh, look, here's Danny Ainge walking on the." It's obviously not the same thing. And anyone who says, "Oh, it's not a big deal," no, it's about respect. It is a respect thing. Like, you went there and went out of your way to rub your heel in it, and he's making all these comments. And for the 2 years after he left the Celtics, mind you, a lot of people brought these comments out where he talked about how he hadn't experienced X, Y, and Z, and how he would love to re-sign here if you'll have me, all that nonsense, all that BS, and then only to come out and do this. And the reason why those comments are coming out, because he spent the last 2 years avoiding playing in Boston because he could not handle the criticism. He is what they call a mental derogatory term for a little person. I don't want to say it because again, I'm not in the interest of offending people, but the term, the phrase that people use. That's what he is. He is weak mentally, and I personally just think he's kind of a coward, because this whole thing centered around what could have been a basketball game, but it wasn't. And it was all about Kyrie. It was Kyrie. And now, again, like you said, though, people follow him. So now there's this image of Kyrie. I saw people out there, oh, Kyrie stomped out the Celtics franchise. No, he was a coward. He was a coward who dropped the ball that first game back. And then, they beat a Celtics team that was severely undermanned and, obviously lacking of talent. So, again, there's a lot of issues I have with that.
Give Jaylen Brown a lot of credit for what he wrote and said, and Jaylen Brown is someone that I admire. He's my favorite Celtic. Not necessarily on the court. I think Jason Tatum is spectacular and is trending in the right direction, as is Jaylen Brown. But off the court, this is someone who is incredibly bright. I think he's going to be the president of the Players Union shortly once Chris Paul decides to step down. And I also think you could see Jaylen Brown running for political office at some point. This is something that he is real about, and he had a really nice take on this, that he thought that to bring race into it on the eve of a playoff game was wrong. I wish he had called out Kyrie directly more than
he's got too much class to do that.
He does. He's a great kid.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. They hate Kyrie. This I can tell.
Jaylen Brown does. I don't know about the rest of the team. Jason Tatum loves him.
Yeah.
I think Marcus Smart likes him, and then maybe Tristan Thompson doesn't like him, and they did play in Cleveland.
Jaylen Brown, yeah, I agree. I think he hates him, and I think it took every ounce of just class that he has in him to not call him out. But when I heard those comments, I was so relieved, because again, it just I thought it I that's the appropriate thing, and to bring up. And again, it's the more we do this, the more we, just so casually accuse people of race or entire cities or people of racism.
Right.
It cheapens the entire fight. And I don't think anyone wants to see that, because we want to see it improve.
Yep.
So, unfortunately, we're out of time, John, but this has been a pleasure. And I'm glad Mike could hear you. I'm glad Mike did get a couple words in there at some point. But, I figured this was going to be a pretty heavy Celtics talk. So, just a reminder, folks, we will be back tomorrow. We will be live tomorrow. But next week, again, no live shows for the week. But keep an eye out on at FPC Radio Live on Twitter for some of our potentially pre-recorded podcasts. And, of course, some great content from my journey to the Great North. So it's been a pleasure, John. Mike, we will talk tomorrow. For those out there listening and watching, tune in tomorrow at 9 a.m. and we'll be back to talk more sports, more nonsense, and whatever the hell else crosses our mind. Have a great day, folks, and we'll talk to you then.